Chapter 221, The Poor Life of Training in Secret. When Lu Shu shouted the name Yu Qian, the purple gourd started to suck magical energy from his body. Just at this moment, before the strength of the gourd could enter Lu Shu's body to draw energy, Lu Shu's celestial map was jolted awake. It was just like in the past when Lu Shu would train the yin-yang kinship of the three. Even before external energy could be amassed, the celestial map would suppress it. Li Dian and Lu Shu were both confused. The gourd didn't have any reaction. The purple light didn't even appear. Only people who understood magical equipment truly understood that the light wasn't emitted by the magical equipment, but it was just a layer of soft glow. What's wrong? Aren't you a practitioner? Li Dian was surprised. He could use it when it was in his arms, why did it stop working when it went over to Lu Shu? Coughs, Lu Shu cleared his throat. Only he himself knew where the problem was. It seemed like in order for him to use this magical relic, he had to treat it like the spears. He had to use his own celestial energy to direct the item instead of waiting for it to use its energy. The celestial map was really too commanding. From Li Dian's distress, plus 233. Definitely not. Any name works as long as you yourself believe that it's a real name. Li Dian said with a black face. Lu Shu pretended to be dissatisfied, your relic isn't easy to use. Lower the price slightly. This only works occasionally, wouldn't I be paying for my life if I use it in a fight? From Li Dian's distress, plus 88. Li Dian couldn't understand why, you try again. Gui Di Gang. No effect. From Li Dian's distress, plus 333. Chao Yunjin. From, plus 444. Miao Fu. Wang Sheng. Song Xiaobao. Even after trying so many times, there was no effect. In contrast, the distress points generated from Li Dian was quite immense. Lu Shu felt that he should try a few more times just for the distress points. At this moment, Li Dian was frustrated. Could it be that only his family could use this relic? But he dared not get another person to try it. He was a fugitive avoiding the world, and it was tough to even encounter an opportunity to trade for magical stones. He didn't want to risk everything by blowing this up. Eventually, it led to this. Even at the start when Lu Shu asked him if he possessed anything real, he said no. If Lu Shu hadn't revealed his identity as a member of the Heavenly Network, he would still be keeping the gourd to himself. Li Dian thought for a long time before defending himself, you saw it just now when I used it. This is definitely not my problem. At the very least, it can be used. I'll give it to you a little cheaper, for magical stones, no lower. Any less and I can't break through. Lu Shu thought gleefully. This was such a great bargaining method he came up with. He confirmed once more, it works as long as I shout someone's actual name? No matter the volume? Yes. That's not right. The gourd in the journey to the west worked when Sun Wukong, Wu Sun Kong or Kong Suan Wu was shouted. Yours is a fake. Lower the price. Li Dian hesitated, I can't lower it anymore. From Li Dian's distress, plus 288. Looking at Li Dian's determination, it seemed like any less wouldn't allow him to break through to Class E. He suddenly thought of a problem. Could this relic be used with his ability to obtain someone's real name? Whoa damn, then wouldn't this be very useful to him? He just didn't know how effective this gourd would be when used against other people. It just didn't seem too reliable. This unreliable feeling wasn't because it was ugly or other factors, it was merely because it was too cheap. In the past, everyone would think that it's better for something to be cheaper, as it's more value for money. But slowly, some people started to suspect the quality of cheap items. Is it genuine? Is it good? Or if there were any problems. And for most of the time, these suspicions were confirmed to be true. It's just that Lu Shu felt that the difference in value between magical stones and magical instruments was too great. Magical stones were useless to him, but magical instruments, on the other hand, could be used by him right now. Even if it's a lowly magical instrument, it was new and fresh. After all, with his rank, he could receive 3 magical stones next month. Lu Shu retrieved 4 magical stones and handed them over to Li Dian. A maniacal expression appeared on Li Dian's face. He had probably been dreaming about magical stones for a long time. It had to be said that since the Heavenly Network was in control, secret practitioners such as Li Dian were really pitiful. Thinking in Li Dian's shoes, Lu Shu felt that he wouldn't even dare search for a plot of magically rich land for himself to train in fear of being exposed. Li Dian passed the gourd to Lu Shu and disappeared amongst the crowd as if he was afraid to lose the 4 magical stones he had just received. Who knows how long he can train secretly for? Even if he has magical stones, his rate of improvement is really too slow. Lu Shu shook his head as he watched Li Dian disappear into the crowd. He really wanted to see what exactly were the effects of this gourd, but it wasn't the right time now. Lu Shu removed his jacket in a secluded corner and then removed the t-shirt that was acting as his mask. Coincidentally, he bumped into Yuan Liangtua and his party just as he walked out. It was an incident of 2 enemies chancing upon each other on a narrow road. Yuan Liangtua and his party knew that Lu Shu was indeed stronger than them, which was why their eyes exuded more envy than hate. "Are you following us?" Yuan Liangtua suddenly remembered what he said about the black market on the train. This Lu Shu didn't even have friends or family here. How could he know about the black market on the very first day of being here? Lu Shu's eyes lit up the moment he saw this group of people. It would really be inappropriate for him to try his new instrument on strangers. He laughed amicably. "Shop well, there's quite a lot of good stuff here." Neither admitting to it nor denying it. Lu Shu and Yuan Liangtua's party merely brushed shoulders and distanced themselves. As he was arriving at the alley, Lu Shu leaped up to the roof from a secluded corner. He felt that it was best not to be seen by Zhu Bishi, who was keeping watch at the alley. "Lu Shu, is there anything fun inside? Why did you wrinkle my shirt so much?" Lu Xiaoyu whined. "Coughs, I traded a gem out. We'll try it later. I even sold a magical stone. We can go for some roasted mutton and mutton soup tomorrow." Apparently, the muttonhead soup is not bad at Shijing City. A light layer of oil would float atop the clear soup and the mutton inside is pure and tasty. Lu Shu laughed. Lu Xiaoyu's drool almost flowed out of her mouth. "Are we going tomorrow morning?"
"Yeah."
Lu Shu heaved a sigh of relief from his heart. She finally changed the topic from her wrinkled shirt. Chapter 222, The Useless Gourd, Part 3. "Lu Shu, what are you waiting for?" Lu Xiaoyu asked curiously as Lu Shu was looking down from the edge of the roof. "Waiting for those 4 college students," Lu Shu replied gleefully. Experimenting on others had always been his hobby. Lu Xiaoyu pouted, "And you didn't allow me to bully others." After waiting for over an hour, Yuan Liangtua and company came out from the alley. What Lu Shu didn't know was that his words served as a reminder to Yuan Liangtua and the rest. Yuan Liangtua thought that Lu Shu must be scheming something. At this point in time, Yuan Liangtua was extremely cautious and was no longer thinking about buying magical stones. Of course, Lu Shu was no god and couldn't predict everything. At that point in time, he responded casually to the accusation of him following them as their plan to buy magical stones did not concern him. Seeing the group of them, Lu Shu whispered, "I'm going to use the magical items, so be prepared. You must lay low." Honestly, Lu Shu wasn't too sure about the uses of this magical gourd. When Yuan Liangtua and company were right below them, Lu Shu immediately whispered the name Yuan Liangtua. At this moment, Lu Shu's celestial energy was transferred into the purple gourd before pouring out of its opening. This time, the target was just in the vicinity, but Lu Shu was previously wondering about the chances of targeting the wrong person, since there were many people with the same name in this world. There was a time when Luoyang International School arranged the students for an exam according to their names. As a result, there was a classroom full of students named Li Xiang. That situation was more than awkward. As such, shouting a name shared by multiple people was very common, and Lu Shu was worried that saying the name Li Xiang would cause the gourd to malfunction. But as soon as he used the magical gourd, he understood its ability. After his celestial energy had entered the gourd, a connection between him and the gourd was established, and the gourd's target would be the same person he thought of. Amidst the late night, there wasn't any light on the roof and it was a pitch black. Lu Shu wasn't worried about being discovered. Lu Shu thought that if this gourd could really trap people, he had to quickly let them out in case of causing any harm to them. Even the Star-Lord Lao Juan's magical gourd was used to store elixirs and had no killing capabilities. Furthermore, the purple gourd was too weak compared to that of Star-Lord Lao Juan's. The celestial energy poured out from the purple gourd and headed towards Yuan Liangtua's direction. Ka. The sound of neck cracking echoed through the silent night, and from Lu Shu's point of view, as soon as the celestial energy touched Yuan Liangtua, he suddenly looked up towards Lu Shu's direction. Lu Shu was taken aback. Was he discovered? But on second thought, that shouldn't be the case. How could the other party suddenly notice him? There was no way Yuan Liangtua could get a clear image of him on the roof. Could it be the purple gourd? A wave of disappointment hit Lu Shu. This can't be right. How can such a cool gourd have the ability to make someone twist his head towards yourself? Can't this be achieved even without the magical gourd? Isn't this the same as making a call? This is *T. No wonder Li Dian's asking price was so low and even fled so quickly. It's because of this useless ability. Lu Shu still couldn't believe it. At this moment, Yuan Liangtua's screamed in pain, ouch 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 ouch. From Yuan Liangtua's distress, +666. The people around were shocked and rushed over. What's wrong? Ka. Another neck-cracking sound was heard as Yuan Li suddenly looked up. Tears were rolling down her cheeks. From Yuan Liangtua's distress, +666. The rest were stunned. What's wrong with this couple? Lu Shu retreated. Sorry about that. What kind of ability is this? God damn it. What happened to trapping people in the gourd? What about the golden-horned king? Although the head twisting wasn't fast, at least it was unpredictable. Lu Shu comforted himself. Li Dian had too little magical energy and could only work up to a 5m distance, but Lu Shu was different. Even 100m was possible. Lu Shu suddenly thought, what if the person he targeted was back facing him? What would happen? That's too much. Whoever made this must have a mental issue. Why can't he just make a proper one? The Star-Lord Lao Juan's magical gourd had the ability to trap anyone inside with just a call of their names. The deity-slaying gourd had the ability to, upon chanting "Turn around baby," release a flying sword to take the head of the target. How powerful! What about my own? Twisting people's heads? Yuan Liangtua and Yuan Li were still crying in pain as Lu Shu handed Lu Xiaoyu the magical gourd. Concentrate your celestial energy and say my name. He turned his head slightly, and after Lu Xiaoyu carried out the experiment, a wave of strength tried to turn his head towards Lu Xiaoyu. But this strength wasn't as strong as Lu Shu's. This means that the effect of this toy is subjective to the strength of others. Lu Shu nodded. Using this on those stronger than himself wouldn't have much effect. What a useless head-twisting gourd. Lu Shu was disappointed after having so many expectations. I knew that this toy wasn't anything decent, but who could have thought that it's this indecent? Speaking of which, isn't this magical gourd extremely useful in identifying spies? Most of the remaining spies were Korean or Japanese with similar appearances as the Chinese. This was known information. Under such a situation, whispering a name to force someone to turn his head could prove invincible. But the problem was that Lu Shu couldn't read Japanese of Korean. Chapter 223, The Tour Group. Lu Shu studied intensely and now, he was already studying physics and chemistry on his own. With his history of not obtaining more than 20 marks even when he combined the marks of those two subjects, it could be said that he was learning everything from scratch. Physics and chemistry took up a portion of his effort, and Japanese another. Lu Shu didn't know for sure if he had enough time. As for Japanese, picking it up would not only help him in sieving out spies, but it would help him in other aspects as well. Lu Shu went into deep thought. Yuan Liangtua and Yuan Li were still crying down below. More people who shopped the black market emerged from the alley. Some of them bought stuff while others didn't. They were rather baffled when they passed by Yuan Liangtua and his party. Why were they crying while looking at the sky? This scene led to them lifting their heads up toward the sky. There was nothing there. Outsiders aside, even Yuan Liangtua and his party had absolutely no idea what was happening. Who would have thought that someone had just bought a magical gourd and wanted to test its effects? Lu Shu suddenly thought. Li Dian definitely knew the effects of this gourd, which was why he faltered and lowered his asking price of the gourd. In reality, Li Dian was not silly at all. It was apparent when he seemed afraid when Lu Shu looked at the silk cloth. And how could Li Dian think of the fact that Lu Shu could use the gourd in conjunction with his ability to obtain the real name of anyone he annoys? It could really work wonders when Lu Shu used this gourd. Lu Shu's celestial strength was numerous times stronger than Li Dian's magical energy. The effective usage of the item would undoubtedly increase, and it could be said that this instrument could be used from a range. There were, however, many limits to this instrument. It wouldn't have much use if someone was dashing towards the user. There was still plenty to learn about this instrument. Lu Shu thought. He caught a glimpse of Little Fury who was sleeping atop Lu Xiaoyu's head. Little Fury was jolted awake immediately as if it thought that something terrible would always happen on itself. This head-twisting gourd, land of seals, spears and other such items were best kept hidden. On one hand, these items were obtained from others, and these meant there were clues and traces. Although Li Dian didn't know who Lu Shu was, and neither did he know how Lu Shu looked like, Lu Shu still wanted to be cautious. On the other hand, if he really wanted to use his instruments to search for spies, the action of twisting heads was too obvious. Then, even if the other party didn't know how Lu Shu obtained real names, it would definitely give himself away. It wasn't to say that Lu Shu was afraid of them, but Lu Shu preferred dealing with others while staying hidden. He didn't like to handle other people openly. Lu Shu didn't continue thinking and kept his gourd within his seal of lands gleefully. He then said to Lu Xiaoyu, let's go find the hotel. The original objective of this trip was to have fun and he never thought of obtaining anything. Now that he got a sum of money and a head-twisting gourd, Lu Shu felt like he was getting lucky. All he could say was, thanks to Yuan Liangtua. The two of them waited for an opportunity to jump off the roof. The dawn had slowly and quietly crept upon Shijing City, and it wasn't really bustling. Beside the wide street, streetlights were a gloomy yellow. Lu Shu held Lu Xiaoyu's hand and asked, you said you were in charge of planning the trip, what are we going to do next? Lu Xiaoyu's little face turned serious and said, actually, it's more worth it if we follow a tour group here. My plan was to have a 9-day tour around Qingzhou Lake and its surroundings. We can go cycling around Qingzhou Lake, Chakasalt Lake, Zhangye Prefecture, Dunhuang, Mingsha Mountain, Sabertooth Spring. Apparently, if we go ourselves, the hotels on the way would be very expensive. So I suggest a tour group. Lu Shu had prepared his identity card earlier. As Lu Xiaoyu didn't have her identification card, Lu Shu brought his account book just in case. In the end, his account book was not required as just one identification card could settle the administrative details of a stay. One room with 2 single beds. Although they weren't related by blood, Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu had depended on each other since a long time ago and they were practically relatives. They behaved like relatives, and in past winters, Lu Shu would even sleep on a mat in Lu Xiaoyu's room. But Lu Shu was also cautious and closed the door when he used the toilet. He would also buy long-sleeved shirts and pants as pajamas for Lu Xiaoyu. After they entered the room, the two of them took out their phones. Lu Xiaoyu wore her pajamas and laid on the bed. It's a good time for tourism in Qingzhou. Hotels are expensive, but we can save quite a lot if we join a tour group. Lu Shu nodded his head. Although many people say that tour groups limit freedom, it's our first time out with no prior experience. It seems better for us to follow a tour group. Maybe we could go out on our own after gaining some experience. In the end, being their first time out without any experience, it was safer for them to follow a tour group. What if they went to a tourist attraction on their own and they don't even know where the entrance was? That would be really awkward. Moreover, the problem which many people had discussed online was not feared by Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu. The problem of using violence to force tourists in tour groups to purchase certain items. Try your best to find a group which offers a reasonable price. We shouldn't be exploited by others, but don't just select the cheapest ones. Lu Shu said. Okay, Lu Xiaoyu nodded her head and pointed to a tour package on her phone, saying, how about this? 20 people in a group, the route is just as we have planned. The price is reasonable too, neither expensive nor cheap. All right, that it is. When do we set off? The morning of the day after tomorrow. After they were done discussing details on the tour, Lu Xiaoyu retrieved a primary 3 mathematics book from the luggage and started reading it. Lu Shu was shocked. Since when did you enjoy studying so much? We're here to play, you don't have to be so hardworking. It's none of your business. Lu Xiaoyu wrinkled her nose and ignored him. All right. It's too late tonight, stop looking at it, Lu Shu laughed. It was a good thing to love studying. Lu Shu wanted Lu Xiaoyu to have a good rest. The night of Shijing City was rather cold and he placed a blanket over Lu Xiaoyu. Lu Xiaoyu's small face emerged from the blanket and asked suddenly, Lu Shu, can we really tour the entire world in future? Lu Shu was caught by surprise but laughed, of course we can. Didn't I already promise you? Okay, Lu Xiaoyu replied but asked again, just the two of us? Lu Shu couldn't laugh nor cry, there's no one else, is there?
Yeah.
Chapter 224, Re-encountering Li Dian. Lu Shu's plan was to bring Lu Xiaoyu out to play. As to whether or not there'll be other people with them, Lu Shu truthfully never thought about it. It wasn't if there was anyone else, but Lu Shu never thought about anyone else. Because, in his world, there was only Lu Xiaoyu and him. What would the future be like? Lu Shu suddenly thought of this problem. He didn't think of anything after a long time. After all, this world was too big to him. So many people and so many events happening. No one could say for sure what was going to happen in the future. He touched Lu Xiaoyu's head, sleep quickly. Tell me a story. Lu Xiaoyu had her 2 hands on the edge of the blanket, seemingly rather embarrassed to ask for a story. On a normal day, Lu Xiaoyu exhibited a level of maturity exceeding far beyond that of a 10-year-old. So naturally, Lu Shu would discuss some stuff with her. The saying goes that the poor man's child would take charge of a household earlier. This saying was apt in Lu Xiaoyu's case. Lu Xiaoyu might be willful, but she learned how to haggle and bargain with uncles and aunties in the market from a young age. At that time, every $1 or $2 saved was extremely meaningful in their lives. Lu Shu thought momentarily. Since he left the orphanage, he had been telling Lu Xiaoyu stories occasionally even though he never read much. He never had much experiences or stories to tell, so he would have a headache whenever Lu Xiaoyu wanted him to tell a story. What could he tell? He didn't notice a hint of a smile at the corner of Lu Xiaoyu's mouth, as if her original intention wasn't to hear a story. It was to see Lu Shu's troubled face by her bedside while thinking of a story, and then he would be able to sit by her side longer. Lu Xiaoyu knew that coming up with a story was Lu Shu's weakness. Earning money, on the other hand, was his strength. Coughs, Lu Shu cleared his throat. This is a long story. In the woods, lived a family of 3 brown bears. One day, Mother Bear saw that Little Bear's fingernails were too long and cut them for him. What do you think happened after that? Lu Xiaoyu hesitated. What happened? He became a little bear. From Lu Xiaoyu's distress, plus 333. Shijing City's altitude was higher compared to the mainland. This could already be considered a place of high altitude, but tourists here didn't have to be overly worried about the ill effects that came with it. It wasn't as serious as imagined. Before summer, the temperature disparity between the day and night in this place was huge. The plants in the streets were already lush and blooming, but even then, people could still be seen scurrying about in thick coats and of course, girls could be seen in short skirts. This was a sight considered quite new and peculiar to Lu Shu. It seemed like people were not in the same season. Luochang's weather was actually rather weird as well. People always said that the 4 seasons were all like summer, but Lu Shu's evaluation of the weather at Luochang was that the summer was like 4 seasons. At that moment, Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu were already improving vastly in their training. The changes in the weather already had no effect on them. The two of them brought a single set of thin jacket, purely for the purpose of blocking the wind. If they really wore short-sleeved shirts around, they wouldn't feel that cold either. There weren't many people on the streets as they walked along. Lu Xiaoyu placed her hand in Lu Shu's huge hands, looking up and asking, "Is the mutton soup really that good here? Since everyone says it's good, there must be something special about it. We should try it since we're here. We're on our own today anyway. We're only joining the tour group tomorrow. We'll have some mutton soup in the morning, then head to Missouri Jia Street in the afternoon. We'll have some lamb neck at night," Lu Shu said merrily. Since he was bringing Lu Xiaoyu along, the main consideration would be food. Once they entered the mutton shop, Lu Shu realized that its online reviews had been exaggerated. Netizens claimed that there were extremely long queues, going late might result in it being sold out. The cheapest was $6. All of those were lies. There wasn't a queue, and even the cheapest bowl cost $20. "Boss, 3 $20 bowls and 3 biscuits," Lu Shu said as he handed over the money. The boss hesitated as he looked at Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu. 3 bowls? Yes, 3 bowls, Lu Shu confirmed. One of the 3 bowls was for Little Fury. In the past, Lu Shu would have definitely not done as such. He would rather share a bowl with Little Fury. But things were different now. Lu Shu was generous. Little Fury, who was on Lu Xiaoyu's head when it heard that Lu Shu was buying 3 bowls, was so touched that it almost thought that Lu Shu was a really good guy. Almost. Lu Shu waited at the counter for his soup as he looked over merrily to the chef in operation. "More meat, more. The face of the chef turned black. "Should I put the entire head in for you?" "That's not necessary." As Lu Shu brought the soup over to Lu Xiaoyu, a peculiar sight could be seen in the shop. A high school student having mutton soup with a pretty young lady, and the lady was holding on to a bowl which was much bigger than her face. It was really warm no matter how you looked at it. And beside them was a little squirrel holding chopsticks and digging for meat. Although magical pets were rare, people were seeing more of them now. The difference from before was that in the past, the first thing everyone would do was to take photos to post online, while all they did now was to have soft but intense discussions amongst themselves. Lu Shu never intended to hide his status as a Daoyuan student. With his military identification in his possession, there was no point in doing everything secretly. It was not like he had anything to hide. As he watched the meat in Lu Xiaoyu's bowl disappear rapidly, Lu Shu was worried the meat was not enough for Lu Xiaoyu, so he took half of Little Fury's over for her. "Little Fury? Why didn't you give her yours? You're trying to act like a nice person by using mine?" From Little Fury's distress, +1+1+1. Lu Shu stared at Little Fury coldly. "Did you not learn new words last night again?" Little Fury immediately lowered its head and continued with its eating. It's okay to forget something minor such as meat. I, Little Fury, will not look for trouble with you. While touring Xijing City in the day, Lu Shu felt the difference between this city and the mainland was not very obvious. He even encountered a few people who emitted magical waves on the streets. All of them looked like students, and it's extremely probable that those were Xijing City's Daoyuan class students. He even observed more meticulously, wanting to find out the quality of the practitioners in Xijing City. Basically, they were about the same as Yuan Liangtua and his company, more or less fluctuating about Class E. There wasn't even a person at the peak of Class E. But thinking about it now, it wasn't like the time at the remains where all students were present. Currently, there was no point just observing a few scattered students. It wasn't an accurate representation. Speaking of which, ever since Little Fury ate the refresher fruit, its abilities had slowly improved till that of a beginner in Class E and only stopped improving when it reached the middle stage of Class E. Lu Shu was rather confused. Could it be that once these animals unlocked their intellect, they would be able to slowly improve all the way until they reach a bottleneck of their magical energy? Then wouldn't that mean that these awakened animals were the most relaxed practitioners? They could kill many human practitioners within seconds. Of course, they could not compare to Lu Xiaoyu, their rate of growth was far behind that of Lu Xiaoyu's. Lu Shu felt that the truth might not be as such. Why, out of the numerous squirrels at the fruit tree previously, was Little Fury the only one who got stronger? Or, amongst awakened animals, there were different tiers of aptitude as well? Only when he thought of this did Lu Shu see Little Fury in a different light. Could it be that this squirrel over here was a prodigy amongst all the squirrels? Seeing that Lu Shu was staring at it, Little Fury almost shivered. It scurried into Lu Xiaoyu's shirt pocket quickly. The life of a rodent was really tough. When they got back to the hotel at night, Lu Shu exchanged his points for a refresher fruit and placed it in front of Little Fury. He wanted to see if Little Fury could continue to improve in terms of its abilities as long as it continues to unlock its intellect. In the end, Little Fury hesitated and pondered over the refresher fruit in front of it. Its expression of, "How could you be so kind?" was directed at Lu Shu. "Are you eating it or not?" Lu Shu's face was black. "I have a refresher fruit for you and you're so reserved?" Little Fury then wolfed down the refresher fruit immediately. This was what it craved the most. Upon eating its first refresher fruit, it shed its gray fur and became a pure white squirrel. It seemed extremely out of this world, attracting the envious stares of girls when out walking on the streets. Upon eating its second refresher fruit, its fur didn't shed anymore. Instead, some purple fur sprouted from the top of its head. The purple cluttered amongst the white looked extremely peculiar and exquisite. Solely based on its appearance, Lu Shu understood that Little Fury had improved once again. As to how much Little Fury could improve, that would have to be observed closely. The next morning, Lu Shu brought Lu Xiaoyu to the gathering point of the tour group, Xianning tourist stop. When they reached there, the tour bus and the tour guide who had a red flag were already there. Lu Shu went over to greet this male tour guide and registered their attendance before waiting at the side. The driver and the tour guide looked over at Lu Xiaoyu occasionally. The little lady was really beautiful, and that white squirrel with purple fur on its head was too eye-catching. They had never seen such a squirrel. Lu Xiaoyu took one look at them and never looked over again. The tour guide, upon Lu Xiaoyu's glance, couldn't help but feel rather foolish for some reason. At this moment, people were slowly pouring in. Lu Shu suddenly saw a rather familiar physique walking over, but he couldn't remember if he had seen this person before. But just as the other party retrieved his identity card to confirm his identity with the tour guide, Lu Shu suddenly saw a bundle of color in the person's bag. That was the silk cloth Li Dian used to cover the gourd that night. Chapter 225, each with his own axe to grind, Part 2. What a small world. Even Li Dian wouldn't have thought that he would meet his buyer in this travel tour. To be honest, Li Dian's face was previously covered and even his hairstyle and clothes were different from now. When Lu Shu first saw him, he only felt a sense of familiarity and would never have thought of his identity if not for the silk cloth. At that point in time, Lu Shu was also wearing a cap and used Lu Xiaoyu's t-shirt to cover his face. The jacket he wore was also kept inside the pink luggage ever since, and the magical gourd was hidden inside the seal of lands. Even when they were headed towards a remote corner, Li Dian was walking in front and never looked back at Lu Shu. This meant that he couldn't have noticed Lu Shu's walking stance, and so Lu Shu wasn't worried about being identified. As of now, Lu Shu was in the dark while Li Dian was out in the open. Although the magical gourd was definitely a steal for 4 magical stones to Lu Shu, it could even coordinate with his system. But the problem was Li Dian's intention to scam him. If this toy had some other useless ability, Lu Shu would be really pissed. If not for the coincidental encounter, Lu Shu would have let the matter rest. It wasn't worth the effort to find someone whose face he didn't even know of. But since they met, there must be some kind of punishment. At this point in time, Li Dian had just achieved the initial stages of Class E. Having training resources definitely made a huge difference. If not for the 4 magical stones, his progress would have been much slower. Lu Shu was suddenly curious if Li Dian was really here on a holiday. All along, Li Dian gave off a mysterious vibe with his magical item heirloom and even a silk cloth that could conceal magical waves. Furthermore, Li Dian had his own secret training method which gave him strength exceeding that of normal humans. Lu Shu couldn't stop pondering about the mystery surrounding this person, and before long, he even started to doubt his true purpose in this travel tour. Lone travelers were not common. Of course, traveling alone could still be possible, and Lu Shu decided to continue observing. On the other hand, Li Dian was smiling from ear to ear as he greeted the travel agency's tour guide politely, probably due to the joy of his training's breakthrough. After all, breaking through a tough situation that had been dragged on for too long would result in happiness. Even for Lu Shu, when the form of his chi finally transitioned from clouds to rain, he was happy about it for a long time despite the pain he went through. But even during this happy occasion, Li Dian had no clue that he was being targeted by Lu Shu. This tour followed a strict quota of 20 packs and never exceeded that. It was claimed that this number was ideal. Soon after, all the tourists had arrived. Almost half of them were middle-aged people who already knew one another, and it seemed like they were all from an organization in Qingzhou. There were 4 college students, 1 male, and 3 females. From their conversations, the boy had just graduated from high school and was one of the girl's younger brother. The 3 girls were also nothing special. They were dressed decently, but the brands were not anything too expensive. But it was undeniable that college girls had learned to put on makeup and all looked ravishing. Initially, Lu Shu was rather delighted at the sight of the 3 girls. But in the end, Lu Shu realized that he couldn't understand their conversations, and Lu Xiaoyu was also excited, commenting about which lipstick, foundation, and mascara were the best. Lu Shu felt like they were from a different world. Lu Shu turned to Lu Xiaoyu, "When you're in college, I'll send you cosmetics." He thought that this would make Lu Xiaoyu happy, but instead, Lu Xiaoyu exclaimed arrogantly, "I don't need it." Lu Shu was so confused. Girls are really complicated creatures. The 2 of them stood at the side quietly as they observed the others starting to mingle, but they had no intention to join in. In the first place, they both thought of human interaction as a burden. However, even though they didn't join in, the 3 girls noticed Lu Xiaoyu and excitedly headed over. "Are you guys from this tour group?" A girl wearing lipstick and a weird-looking black necklace greeted them politely. However, the necklace complemented her overall outfit. Lu Shu smiled and nodded, "That's right." Lu Shu was stunned at the other party's medium-pitched voice. "Hello, you can call me Shu Li. Is this squirrel a rumored magical pet? Are you guys Dao Yuan students?" The girl named Shu Li asked. Initially, Li Dian had not noticed Lu Shu and company as they were too low profile. But upon hearing the conversation, he turned around and saw Little Fury, which put him on his toes. Daoyuan class and Heavenly Network were the two groups of people he wanted to avoid at all cost. In fact, the Daoyuan class was the Heavenly Network's reserve troops. Lu Shu shook his head, "We're not from Daoyuan class. My place is a magical land and it mutated there." But the magical land was sold afterward. Lu Shu said this with a poker face as he didn't want to expose his Daoyuan student identity in front of Li Dian. With a flick of his wrist, a small bronze compass fell into his palms as he took a peek and saw the needle pointing towards the north. He finally calmed down. Shu Li asked curiously, "What's its name?" "Little Fury," Lu Shu replied gleefully. Shu Li was stunned for a moment. What a weird accent. At this moment, the boy traveling with the girls shouted, "Big brother, the tour guide is calling for you." Shu Li replied without hesitation, "Okay, I'm coming." He then smiled at Lu Shu, "I'll take my leave first. We can chat later." This took Lu Shu by surprise. What did that boy call Shu Li? Brother? No wonder he had a medium-pitched voice. What's with the current society? Is differentiating male from female so hard? He was suddenly reminded of a friend of his, Jiang Shui. But Lu Shu was rather certain of Jiang Shui's gender due to his Adam's apple and lack of chest. Lu Xiaoyu was giggling over Lu Shu's distress. Lu Shu frowned, "What's so funny? Tell me, what exactly are you laughing at?" "Lu Shu, your head is steaming." "I'm not." Little Fury was also chirping happily when Lu Shu glanced over, "Are you done with your homework?" Little Fury. There were already 16 people in this year and the tour guide looked at his watch. "Let's be patient and wait for 10 more minutes before setting off. We shouldn't let those late people affect the rest." A middle-aged woman commented, "That's right, youngsters these days have no sense of urgency." Lu Shu was still secretly observing Li Dian. He felt that Li Dian's motive in this tour wasn't so simple and this feeling was purely generated from the previous impression of him. At this moment, Lu Shu sensed a wave of magical energy and immediately checked it out. It was Yuan Liangtua. F***CK, what are the chances? Are the four of them joining the tour? Lu Shu suddenly had an idea. Quietly, he brought Lu Xiaoyu and walked over to Li Dian's side. The bronze compass in Li Dian's palm gave off a mild vibration and he immediately looked down. The needle was pointing towards the four teenagers walking over. He was shocked but kept his composure. When he looked up again, he noticed the leader of the four teenagers staring at him. Li Dian was taken aback. "What's going on? Does he know me? That doesn't make sense." Lu Shu was still standing behind Li Dian but turned his gaze to elsewhere. On the other hand, Yuan Liangtua was annoyed just at the sight of Lu Shu. Forget it, he can't possibly deal with this youngster. Previously, he was too focused on the rank of the military identification and didn't take a good look at Lu Shu's name. He wanted to turn around and leave but they already paid for the tour, amounting to over $12,000. But seeing that Lu Shu was pretending to not recognize them, Yuan Liangtua let out a sigh of relief. "Let's just leave it as it is." Li Dian was still confused as he looked over again to confirm. However, Yuan Liangtua's expression was back to normal and was reporting to the travel agency. "What is this situation?" Lu Shu was rather disappointed. Daoyuan students had a stronger physique than the normal, which was why they recovered so quickly from the neck twisting. But as it seemed, this tour was going to be interesting. Li Dian, Yuan Liangtua and company, Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu all had their own motives in this tour. Who knew what was going to happen in the next 9 days?
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty. Man, we just putting on a show. Try to look to the heavens,